If you're building a pitch deck right now, pause, because I'm about to break down a real pitch deck slide by slide. I'm going to show you what's working, what's missing, and how to strengthen the story and visuals so it actually lands with investors. As someone who's helped founders raise over 60 million in capital, this is going to be all shared experience, not just my opinions. So let's dig into this deck, and we're going to break it down from the lens of what investors are really looking for. So let's dive into what a good deck looks like versus a really, really bad pitch deck. Now, remember, the beauty and design of a pitch deck is not the reason an investor is actually going to go in on a deal or not. So let's analyze these very, very different companies, but again, contextually and design-wise. Neither of them, or really any deck for that matter, will never be perfect. The living, breathing document, so I want to go through some of the fundamentals and some of the key differences of what makes something really good versus really bad. Now, these are made up companies and details for the sake of an example, but I see very, 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 very similar ones on an almost daily basis. So let's talk about the poor example from FinCapEx. Now, what you'll notice throughout is that there is no logo on each slide. So if you're not a household name yet, put the logo on each slide. And overall, the white background makes it seem unfinished and unbranded versus the good example here, Bandware, who utilizes their brand colors throughout the slide as a whole. You can also see the logo changes colors and can be implemented throughout. Again, doesn't have to be crazy professionally designed to be perfect or capture attention. Here you can see the first slide is more of a tone setting slide. It should have something specific or branded versus random icons. I do like the use of the logo and one-liner, but you can see a good example. I always recommend designation as CEO or co-founder, email, and website, because again, it's tone setting and you don't want someone scrolling all the way to the end to find that information. Now here, see more of the problem and story that happens from a specific photo, very, very clear when you glance at it, to no investor wants to read a full paragraph of text. They also want to know the problem and or why you before what you do. It's like the example of start with why. Too long, someone's going to get caught up in reading this and not listening to you or just quickly scan through the deck. I always recommend founders start with some sort of statistics or examples to back up the problem if they're not going to lead with that either. You can see this is secondary to that. And numbers, the quantified aspects are way, way, way important. Now, just showing your degree and background in something here like this isn't as interesting to investors because it doesn't technically give specific accolades or credibility, and they don't really care about just general analytics and leadership skills. Now, for the problem, it's taken too long to get to. Random icons don't help. Too big of text, no branding. The problem is generic, whereas in utilize that header is proper real estate. And saying no one else solves this problem or does that before just opens a can of worms for someone trying to discredit you. Now, I love the use of columns here in real imagery, so it's bold, in your face, and easy to see. Versus the inside, again, it's generic text. The yellow is hard to read, and the actual reason behind the details are not impactful or clear. So companies have data already. They need faster, smarter things. I would always quantify that. I would bring in facts versus generic phrases that can be pasted into someone else's pitch versus this is specific, and now we know these actual sources behind them. In terms of the solution here, this doesn't show us what the solution looks like. Everyone wants to be AI integrated and is working with 12 businesses to date. Okay, over what time period, what actual problems are you solving? Then here that there's so much text, again, someone is going to be scanning over that and not actually listening and reading. Better off putting it in columns or even shorter bullet points. Now, in terms of revenue and traction, this is a better example because you can see the blocks, you can see the specific aspects and the most important metrics that are quantified here. I like changing the actual quantified details in color versus live MVP already in market. Okay, over what time period, in what ways, serving how many specific people, pair that like information together. Market opportunity. Both of these are fine. You don't even need your full TAM, SAM, and SOM, but what makes the difference here is when you showcase a SOM, the service obtainable market, showing what it's driven by, your actual maybe LTV or AOV in the market, that's when it becomes important. So you can see the header is more different and specific versus just market opportunity on this better example. No investor needs to see your screenshot of your full projections. That comes in a data room, that will come later. This doesn't need to be showcased on a deck because someone's going to be trying to do the math, find errors, look at the trends, and it's not actually helping. Now, in a go-to-market here, all of this is extremely vague. Existing workflows, aligned with reporting, random logos, and saying the first and only to do something is just a cause for concern. And historically, being the first in something is not always the best. So think about actual specifics, for example, unit economics, an actual launch plan with bullet points of what and how and where you're going to get that and in what way. That is now where things become real. Now, there's no competition analysis here because saying you're the first and only ones, that only is a cause for concern. So what I like to do is name the top 1 to 3 competitors and showcase where you're directly pairing up in specific areas, not just being better at something. Or if there's another consumer or financial or tech company, I would quantify details in terms of comparison or industry trends. You can see the projections are very different here in terms of revenue versus gross profit. You can also mark hitting profitability. You can also mark where the revenue is split in terms of if having different channels and what your core KPIs are. There's a lot that you can do here, but no one needs a full financial breakdown. Save your metrics for the data room and keep them in full. Now, the problem here is we don't know anything about anyone in the why. Versus here, we have specific bullet points of what actually could translate to growing the company. The co-founder and CEO is always going to be listed first, and we've got that header of combined team experience. Again, doesn't have to be perfect, but you can see them name drop specifically and you want actionable things versus being generic. Now, the problem with this ask slide is that you're giving details that are negotiable and can only cause more problem versus what the ROI of the opportunity is going to be. Now, instead, what I would do is put the details of what it's going to help achieve, if anything's committed, and what the output is going to look like. They can get into the specifics later. Remember, this is just initial pitch meeting. And then instead of wasted space, you add your one-liner, again, contact information or a preparation for an appendix slide. Now remember, these aren't perfect. I'm not a designer. This is just some generic output, but think about having the team or founder aspect and the why, starting with that logo on every slide. Use those branded colors. Ensure you utilize small text and bullets throughout because no one wants to read a full paragraph. So I know this isn't perfect and could feel a little generic in some ways, but the point is that you want to have these fundamentals down. And if there's a specific type of company that you want me to do an example on, drop a comment below.